This is a fictional story written for reflective and emotional purposes. You can go years without being touched, not physically, but emotionally. That night, something changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't planned. It didn't arrive with fireworks or declarations. It came softly, in the form of a man who didn't ask what I did for a living, who didn't tell me I looked beautiful, who simply looked at me like I was still there, even when I wasn't sure I was. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel chosen. I felt known. This is not a story about falling in love. It's about something quieter. The night I stepped out of the script I had been living in and let myself feel again. I didn't plan for the night to mean anything. Not to me. Not to anyone. It was supposed to be like so many others. Quiet, intentional, and safe. One drink. A dimly lit space. A brief exchange with the bartender. Then home to a minimalist apartment filled with curated comfort and the kind of silence that doesn't ask questions. But there was a shift that evening. Not in the room. In me. My name is Jessica.
I'm 33,
A content strategist in Austin. I live in bullet points and productivity. Deadlines are my lullaby.
control my sanctuary.
For years, I believed structure could shield me, that if I planned well enough, I could outrun the ache of unpredictability, that spreadsheets could soothe heartbreak, that staying composed was the same as staying whole. But wholeness doesn't come from holding it all together. It comes from being allowed to unravel, gently, without shame. 2 years ago, my marriage ended, not with a slammed door or shouted truths, just two people, side by side, silently agreeing that love, real love, shouldn't feel like this. Quiet, measured, almost polite. I moved back near Ladybird Lake, repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, planted peace lilies in corners that used to feel like voids. I dated again. I tried. I counted 32 dates. Some kind, some funny, some attractive in ways I could list but never feel. None of them made me tremble, and I began to wonder, was I broken? Or had I simply built a life so perfectly structured that desire no longer had a place to sit? That night, I wasn't looking for anything. I wore my favorite black sweater, the one that made me feel like I knew who I was, even when I didn't. Hair tied back.
No lipstick.
Just me muted, but still showing up. The bar was familiar. A tucked-away place inside a boutique hotel where jazz spilled like molasses across wooden floors and old stories hung in the air like dust in golden light. I ordered one drink, old-fashioned,
No twist.
just like always. And then I turned,
And he was already there.
I didn't notice him at first. I was too busy scanning the room for comfort, not attention, but he was already there, leaning casually against the end of the bar, his sleeves rolled just enough to show the faint edges of an old tattoo.
He wasn't watching me.
Not like men often do when they want something. He was simply aware of the space, of the music, of presence. When I returned to my seat, drink in hand, he spoke, not loudly, not to interrupt, just enough to meet the moment. You drinking alone? The question didn't feel like bait. It felt like a bridge. I looked at him, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel the need to shrink or perform. Apparently not anymore, I said, and he smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't chase. It just opens a door and waits to see if you'll walk through. We talked, not about jobs, or where we saw ourselves in 5 years. There were no mentions of apps or what brought us here, just fragments. Little moments passed like notes on a slow piano.
Soft.
Present. Undemanding. His name was Nathan. He didn't ask mine right away, and I didn't feel the need to offer it. There was a gentleness to the way he listened, like he wasn't waiting to speak next. He was simply listening and being there. We sat in the warm hush of low jazz, the scent of whiskey and wood in the air, and I found myself laughing without hesitation.
No laers, no filters.
Just breath and space and a conversation that felt like exhaling after holding your breath for far too long. When I reached for my coat, he didn't rush. He just said, almost like an afterthought, "I live nearby. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I have a bottle of something worth opening." No pressure.
No expectations.
And somehow I believed him, not because I wanted to be swept away, but because, for the first time in forever, someone had offered me a space, not to escape who I was, but to show up as I am.
I didn't say yes.
I simply nodded.
Once.
And the world shifted. His building was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, just calm, intentional. We took the elevator in silence, not the awkward kind. The kind where silence feels like agreement, like you've both stepped into something that doesn't need to be rushed. When he unlocked the door, I hesitated, not out of fear, but out of something older than that. The instinct to protect yourself, even when you're safe. But his place was warm, not because of the lighting, but because nothing in it tried to impress me. Amber tones, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, books that looked red, chairs that invited you to stay longer than you planned.
No displays. No curated corners.
Just a space that felt lived in.
Honest.
He poured 2 glasses without asking what I liked, as if he already knew. I didn't come here for preferences. I came because something inside me was tired of pretending I had none. The drink was smoky, deep, deliberate. It settled into my chest like a truth I'd been too afraid to say out loud. Then, with the same calm voice he'd used all evening, he said something that made me pause. "I invited a few friends tonight. Nothing loud. Just presence." I looked at him, not confused, just curious. "What kind of friends?" He met my gaze, still steady, still grounded. The kind who've learned how to hold space for a woman.
Not to take.
Not to fix. Just to witness. There was no shift in his tone, no tension, just clarity. They're not here to impress. They're here to be honest. I took a slow sip. The glass felt heavier than before. Or maybe I did. "And tonight, what kind of night is this?" I asked. He tilted his head, not smiling, but not avoiding either. "The kind you remember if you choose to stay." The air stilled, and in that stillness, something ancient inside me leaned forward, not in fear, but in quiet recognition. There are moments in life when you're not being pulled, but gently invited. And if you listen closely, your own voice will whisper, "Stay." The first knock on the door didn't startle me. By then, I had already made a quiet decision, not to run from the unfamiliar, but to stay curious inside it. Nathan didn't make a show of welcoming them. He simply opened the door like he'd done it 100 times before, then turned to me with a gaze that asked, "Are you still with me?" I was. The men entered one by one, not like guests arriving at a party, but like pages turning in a book I hadn't realized I was ready to read.
No loud greetings.
No explanations, just presence. Nathan introduced them by first name only, as if that was all that mattered. "This is Alex." His eyes were warm, quiet. His voice carried a softness that didn't shrink. It invited. He smelled of pine wood and something faintly sweet, like vanilla left out in the cold. Jonas, taller, slower in movement, with the kind of gaze that didn't look at you. It read you, not to analyze, but to understand what hadn't yet been said. And this is Caleb, younger. A bit of mischief in his smile, but not the reckless kind, the kind that knows how to play without hurting anything fragile. They didn't flirt, they didn't stare, they didn't ask questions. They just arrived. And somehow, their presence didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt like an answer to a question I hadn't dared to ask. I stood there, still holding my drink, my fingers wrapped a little tighter around the glass, as if anchoring myself. But no one tried to disarm me. No one leaned in too close. They simply let the moment expand, like warm air filling a quiet room. Nathan moved to the kitchen, offered more glasses. His movements weren't performative. He wasn't hosting. He was holding space.
For them.
And, without saying it,
For me.
There were no labels, no roles to fall into, only presence. It was then I realized this night wasn't going to be about what anyone wanted from me. It was about what I might rediscover within me. And for the first time in years, that thought didn't scare me. It made me breathe. No one told me where to sit. No one offered instructions. But somehow, my body knew exactly where it wanted to be. On the soft velvet of the sofa, warm glass in hand, I leaned back, not to retreat, but to rest. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed stillness to find me. But this stillness, it wasn't empty. It wasn't the kind of silence that follows disconnection. It was full of breath, of presence, of something deeply human unfolding without agenda. Alex was the first to approach. He didn't reach for me. He simply placed a cup of herbal tea on the table beside me. A small gesture, a kind one. And then his fingers brushed lightly across my wrist, not to claim, but to ask, "Are you still here?" I nodded, barely, but he saw it. He felt it. Jonas remained across the room for a while, watching, not with intensity, but with care, as if waiting for a moment when my gaze would meet his without fear. And when it did, he stood slowly, walked toward me, and pressed his lips gently to my collarbone. Not possessively, not even expectantly, just a quiet thank you for letting him begin where many never get to arrive. Caleb, the youngest, brought lightness into the room. He stood behind me, traced a slow line along the back of my neck, and whispered, "I swear I never wear matching socks." I laughed, genuinely. The sound felt round in my chest, surprising, soft, and real. No one rushed. No one led. It wasn't choreography, it was conversation. Not in words, but in breath, skin, space, and stillness. Nathan didn't touch me. Not yet. But he was there. In every small adjustment to the room's energy. In every glance that said, "You don't have to do anything to be worthy of being here." And me? I didn't feel like a woman being surrounded. I felt like someone being held by a tension that didn't devour,
but witnessed.
Each touch was a question. Each pause was a boundary being honored. When I didn't pull away, they didn't push in. They stepped closer, slowly, like they were weaving me back together, thread by invisible thread, from pieces I hadn't even realized had been scattered. Stillness, I learned that night, isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of trust. And in that room, with the lights dimmed and nothing rehearsed, I wasn't a woman waiting to be desired. I was a woman finally allowing herself to feel. I don't remember exactly when the night began to shift, not because something changed abruptly, but because everything flowed with such care. You didn't notice time passing. There was no crescendo, no climactic gesture, only presence, unfolding like water over stone, soft, sure, and undeniable. I lay stretched across the sofa, the amber velvet warming beneath my skin, the last notes of shared breath still lingering. But no one rushed to fill the silence. I wasn't drained. I wasn't undone. I was held in a way I hadn't known I'd been needing. Nathan sat beside me, not touching, just near, like a shoreline letting you come back when you're ready. He poured cocoa from a thermos he'd prepared earlier. The steam rose gently, curling into the space between us like an exhale with no question attached. He didn't say, "You were amazing." He didn't try to explain what had happened. Instead, he wrapped a warm cloth around the back of my neck and simply said, "Nothing was taken from you tonight. You just got a part of yourself back." And I believed him because I could feel it in my chest, in the way my breath moved without force, in the way my body no longer braced for disappointment. Caleb stepped onto the balcony for a moment, and when he returned, he held a worn, slender book. He didn't say much, just asked softly, "Would it be all right if I read something?" I nodded. He opened to a page, without ceremony. His voice wasn't trying to impress. It simply carried the words, like water carries light. "I want to be the warmth that wakes something blooming inside you." Neruda. I closed my eyes. Not out of tiredness, but because my senses were already full. Alex knelt at my feet, gently wiping each toe with a warm cloth, as if this, too, was part of the ritual. Not one of worship, but of care. And Jonas, quiet, steady Jonas, removed his jacket and draped it softly over my thighs. He didn't say much.
Just this.
"So you won't feel empty anywhere." No one claimed the moment. No one tried to mark it as their own. They simply let it be, like the final page of a novel you didn't want to finish. Not because it wasn't complete, but because it left you with something to carry home. The light came in quietly. Soft streaks of early morning slipping through sheer curtains, painting the walls with the kind of gold that doesn't demand attention, just presence. I didn't open my eyes right away. I didn't need to. My body already knew. This wasn't my South Lamar apartment. The mattress was softer. The sheets smelled faintly of cedar, cocoa, and something warmer, something human. No phone buzzed. No Slack messages. No calendar reminders flashing across the screen. Just the gentle sound of a spoon stirring in a mug. And somewhere in the distance, the tender scent of toasted bread floating in like memory. I sat up slowly, hair tousled, my bare legs tucked beneath the oversized shirt someone had draped over me. I didn't feel exposed. I felt wrapped. Not claimed, acknowledged. When I stepped out into the living room, the cool floor met my feet like a soft welcome. The first face I saw wasn't Nathan's. It was Caleb, standing at the kitchen counter, a cup of tea in one hand, his gaze easy and unguarded. He looked up, smiled. Not the kind of smile that wants something, just the kind that says, "You're still here. And I'm glad you are. So, I guess last night wasn't too terrible," he said, his voice rough with sleep, gentler than ever. I let out a quiet laugh. Not polite, not performative, just real. If I had left without learning anything about myself, That would have been terrible. He nodded, didn't add anything else. And in that silence, I felt more heard than I had in entire conversations before. Nathan entered from the balcony a few minutes later. Hair still a little messy, shirt half-buttoned, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He didn't say good morning. He didn't ask how I felt. He just handed me a cup, his fingers brushing my wrist like punctuation. Not a beginning, not an end, just continuation. No one brought up the night before. There was no need. We weren't pretending it didn't happen. We simply didn't need to explain it. Because something real doesn't ask for a summary. It lives in you, even when the words are gone. When I returned to my apartment that afternoon, everything looked the same. The white walls, the beige chairs, sunlight pouring across the floor in its usual angle. Steady, familiar, predictable. But I was not the same. I stepped inside with a kind of stillness that felt earned, like someone who had crossed an invisible threshold, not into someone else's life, but back into her own. I didn't unpack, didn't scroll, didn't reach for distractions. Instead, I poured a glass of water, sat down at my desk, and reopened a draft I had abandoned weeks ago, a campaign titled Living Truthfully with Desire. The last line I had typed blinked at me like a remnant of an old self. Women should learn to adjust their expectations. I deleted it. Then I wrote, women do not need to apologize for desires that have been dormant for too long. Some longings don't need permission. They only need space. I stared at the sentence, let it breathe, and for once, I didn't second-guess myself. I used to think that a night like that would leave me confused, ashamed,
Guilty.
but I felt none of those things, because nothing about it was careless. Nothing was taken. Nothing was forced. Every moment had been an invitation, not to perform, but to remember. I remembered what it felt like to be looked at and not assessed, to be touched without being consumed, to be witnessed without being asked to explain. I am 33 years old,
Divorced.
strategic by nature, cautious by default. But last night, I stepped out of the life I had planned and into the part of myself I had postponed for far too long. I used to fake comfort. I used to fake pleasure. I used to smile to keep peace. But last night, nothing was faked. No part of me was muted for someone else's convenience. No piece of my body or soul was bargained with for love. There was only presence and permission. And if there's one truth I carried home with me, it's this. A woman doesn't need permission to desire. She only needs a space safe enough to stop apologizing for it. So now I ask you, yes, you still listening, have you ever asked yourself for permission to be fully known? Not loved for your potential, not admired for your effort, but simply seen as you already are? If your answer is yes, drop a comment. Even just a speech balloon, no need to explain. Just a quiet way of saying me too. And if you feel safe enough to share more, do. Because someone out there might be waiting to hear your version of this truth so they can finally live their own. If this story touched something real in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need to feel less alone. Every moment of connection matters. Thank you for staying until the end.